chat tonight.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know
There's
if I'm
first for everything.
So it is great to have. So we've got our special fill-in guest host, Mariana Mancuso.
How's it going?
Who is overdressed for the occasion as usual.
Okay, I'm not even going to start with my take of this is just too much. Like, no. But I'm super excited to be here with you and with Richie Alisea. I mean, wow, this is a really, really great evening.
Yeah.
So Richie is the man. Richie, welcome tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and be chatting with two of my very favorite people. It's really we're gonna have a lot of fun, and thanks for having me.
So I just got a text message asking if Richie brought his guitar.
I don't play.
So it must have been somebody who watched us last week.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, sorry, I can't follow up Josh with that. He's way too talented, and I'm talented with other things that people don't care about as much as just guitars.
So no pressure on you, Richie, but last week was the greatest episode in the history of Monticello Live. Blew out all the records. It was the Trump campaign.
Guitar, it helps.
It was the Trump inauguration of Monticello Live episodes last week.
So the biggest audience ever.
Blew it out the door, man.
Women ovulating in real time, it was just beyond comprehension.
So we were trying to figure out who wouldn't mind following the legendary Josh Gillespie. And I figured Richie Alisea wouldn't mind following Josh.
I would not, because I love Josh. And when we met through you, and I was on his podcast, and super, super, super great guy. I love him.
So, welcoming all the folks in, I will point out to everybody that we are taking questions tonight. So, you guys can't cheat. Our two guests, you can't cheat and watch the box. You wait until I post something on the screen. We get a question. Sometimes we get a lot of questions. Sometimes people are asleep or drunk and not paying attention. And so we don't get a lot of questions. But we are taking questions. So Richie, my man.
Yeah.
So why don't you introduce yourself to the folks?
Yeah.
Tell me why you're so awesome. Besides being good looking and having an amazing beard, why are you so awesome?
Thank you. Again, you flatter me. I'm Richie Alisea, and I'm a digital consultant working with, I've worked in politics and this is going to make me sound a lot older than I actually am. I'm going on my 16th or 17th year working in the field. I started out pretty young. I was still in college, walked into my local state senator's office and said, hey, I'm studying political science. I'll do anything you want. Just put me on the phones, put me on door duty, whatever. And 6 months later, they hired me, and I never turned back. And that was back when I was a very, very, very proud Republican from New York. Grew up in Brooklyn, lived in Queens. And there's like 12 of us that that fit in that category. So as a result, I wound up getting around a bit in New York Republican politics and worked my way up and handled a lot of races. And this was all pre 08, pre-digital, being the center of everything, pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter. So but at the same time, I always had a mind for data. And other kind of similar things in that area, but basically held every role on a campaign, especially on the local end. I ran campaigns, did comms, which, I could get into how I'm not a comms person. Did field, a lot of field. I would say my most competent and most comfortable role was that of like a political director, and that was always kind of my best fit on any campaign when I was first starting out. After a while, I just kind of grew. I grew into the roles that I was taking on, and wound up kind of having a hand in most aspects of a campaign. From there, I moved out to Los Angeles to work for those who don't know, a company named Nation Builder, which provides software to campaigns and organizations that basically gives them the basic toolbox of everything they need to kickstart an effort. I was then moved, still working for Nation Builder. They moved me out to DC. I was their first employee. Again, still Republican. So my task was to be their like RNC their link to Republican digital firms and the like. And it didn't take long before I was poached by Targeted Victory and began working there. And I spent some time, working on some of their products, some of the tech side, the development side of things, giving them, kind of the digital perspective or the consultant's perspective in the product development process, and then things got interesting. In late 2015, a friend of mine, I'm not going to badmouth anybody, so I won't say who, but both of you know who I'm talking about.
We are not mentioning this
brought me in. He had a one-man shop. He was a web designer. Brought me in because to branch out into the strategy side of things, and so that's what I did. And then 2016 came along, and the whole world changed. And I was always a fairly liberal Republican. And then when Donald Trump as soon as he came down that escalator, I was like, fuck no, not happening. I'm never going to be on board with that. And it only kind of kept building up after that. And at the time, the person I was working with felt the same way. And we spent most of that 2016 At the time, so things have since changed, which leads me to where I am today. But we spent pretty much that entire cycle on various efforts to keep him from becoming the nominee, culminating in joining Evan McMullen's campaign for president in August. I was deputy digital director on that campaign, and obviously, we all know how things turned out in 2016, and it was then that the perspective changed for the person I was working with, and in a way that was not comforting to me. I stick to my principles pretty stubbornly, and late in that year. We had a very kind of candid discussion about it, and I was very vocal about there being, and this is strictly from a business standpoint, there being a market for moderates, for nonpartisan candidates, for pragmatists, for those who are left out of the divisive political process. And it was at that time that I parted ways in a secretive way. I stayed on board, but decided one morning in January of the next year that I would just say, screw it. I'm going to file an LLC in Delaware and just start reaching out to people in centrist world, in trusted confidants, and just say, hey, I'm dipping my toe here. I want to see how, I want to prove my theory right. And that was when I started Great Lake Strategy, which is my own digital consulting firm. And it wound up that there was and is a very big market for that. Because it includes the election reform movement and other things. I built out the business in that year, and it was a good thing I did, because this gentleman's company went under at the end of 2016 or 2017 rather, and so then I was able to go public, as they say, and say, hey, this is what I'm doing now. in the meantime, I'd kept in touch with everybody I worked with, everybody I met that was in the movement, and was a hardcore and am hardcore, never Trump, never wavered, and very vocal about it. People knew it. People knew where I stand. I never hid it, and so I got quite a bit of work in that realm. Lately, most recently, and then I'll stop dominating the talk here. I was the digital director on Joe Walsh's campaign for president, which we know how that turned out, and I know that there's a lot there to unpack. And then it was at that time that Evan gave me a call and said, "Hey, after Walsh, what are you doing? Do you have like other stuff that's in the pipeline? Do you have we want to see what's going on?" I said, "Well, frankly, I'm just on the market. I'm open for business as always." And so they brought me in. Partly because of the work that I've done in the portfolio, and partly because of my out there record of not being like the person I used to work with, and really just sticking to my guns on what was right and what my principles were, and literally putting my livelihood where my mouth is by going out there and starting a business that's founded on that. And so I am now the digital director for Stand Up Republic, a colleague of Mariana here, and I'm going. I just wrapped up my first year in that role, and I couldn't be happier. It's we had a nice win in November, and while we don't put it out there as much as a lot of other people will do, and a lot of we don't have there's no pieces about me inventing the Republican internet or anything like that. We had a lot of efforts that went a long way into electing Joe Biden as the next president of the United States, and those efforts obviously still continue because of the events that have been ongoing. So it's I'm with fellow travelers, old friends, met new friends, and that's what I do.
That is great. I love that. I love hearing your story, Richie. I think it's really inspirational for people that are trying to figure out how to hang their own shingle or what to do just in general on how to get started in politics. So one thing I have one question, but it's twofold. So what is your favorite part about what you do? And then what is your least favorite part? So why don't you tell me what your favorite part is, what you do first, and then your least favorite.
Yeah. So for favorites, it's two things. One is the people that I get to work with. Honestly, since I spun up my firm, never had a situation where I worked with a candidate or another consultant or anybody where it didn't feel like we were tightly knit in a way that I never, ever, ever felt in Republican politics. The people that surround us in our corner of political activism and consulting, we're cut from a different cloth, and there's the people are fantastic. They're brilliant, they're principled, they're not afraid, which is important for me because as you know, Mariana, and Jacob, I throw punches. I'm totally comfortable doing that. That's partly from being brought up in New York politics. That's the only way to do politics there, but also because it's important. And so that's one. And two is I'm one of the very lucky people in this world, in or out of politics, that gets to get up and do work every day that I love, that I care about, and work with people that are awesome. I know almost everybody I know who's not in politics hates their job, hates the people they work with, dreads getting up in the morning. I don't. I'm lucky enough to have built something and be proud of that, and lucky enough to do something that I've been doing for a long time, and that I truly do love doing. Like, I don't see a second career for me. There are people that say, you go through 1, 2, 3, 4 different careers in your lifetime. My wife tells me, you're never going to retire, Richie. Like, even when you're like old and retirement age, like, you might pull out a little bit of the like waking up at 2 a.m. to do stuff time, but you're always going to be in it. You're never going to retire because you love it too much. And so those are the two best things. The thing that could be better is that this country there's a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. In my lifetime, this is the most divisive. I think that the country, from what I can remember and think of in my entire life, this is the most divisive the country has ever been. There's just so much anger that's out there. Like, people get angry, and they've always gotten angry. They've always been passionate about the things they care about. But today, that passion doesn't take the form of, I'm going to protest, or I'm going to do something like run for public office. It takes on the form of, I'm going to be a cosplay badass and try to stage a coup in the Capitol. Like, that's no good. There's a lot of work to do. Granted, I'm looking forward to changing that, but it's always, from our perspective, an uphill battle, which can be difficult sometimes. It can be demoralizing at times, I'm not going to lie. And that's probably the one thing that I'm like, well, that could be better. But our day will come. It's coming.
So let's get to Dave's question, and I'm going to let you guys tackle this one for a second because you're both smarter than me.
I'll let you kick it off, Mariana.
Oh, geez. Okay. Do we expect violence in DC and or across the country on Wednesday? Dave, I think that is a very astute question, and I have a lot of reticence, right? This should be a moment in our nation where we are excited, where we are coming together. For women across the country, even the globe, I even venture to say, we should be lacing up our shoes and being careful where we step because there's glass everywhere. Unfortunately, it is being very overshadowed by Trump, his supporters, and Republicans who refuse to drop it and continue on and admit that the election was not stolen and there was not any evidence of fraud. In terms of violence, the domestic terror attack that we saw in our Capitol on January 6th was, unfortunately, an apex of a simmer, a boiling point that we had reached from months-long disinformation campaigns and conspiracy theories peddled by our president and his followers, as well as by Republicans in office who continue to do it right up until that day. I want to say that, there's not going to be any violence and we're going to be safe. What I want to say to that, and the truth is that we know that the FBI is working overtime. Intelligence agencies are doing everything they can to ensure that nothing happens. They turn the Capitol into a green zone. I'm confident in our law enforcement and our intelligence agencies that we'll be able to usher in a new administration on Wednesday with the utmost safety and security that we saw with Abraham Lincoln when he was being ushered into office and inaugurated in March in that cold, dreary 1861. But I think that it's important that we underscore that this violence was not something that we weren't shocked. Anybody sitting on here, myself, Richie, Jacob, I think we can all agree this wasn't surprising. As somebody that spent a good portion of a year plus studying extremism, radicalization, and lone wolf terrorism, I can tell you this didn't surprise me, but it did sadden me. So what do you guys have to say about that, Richie? What do you think?
Yes, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you said, especially about us knowing about it. Like we were following it for weeks. We while we do have certain insights and certain sources and things like that the general public may not have, it doesn't take a genius to understand what had been simmering for a very long time. All you have to do is turn on CNN's 24-hour nonstop coverage of everything Donald Trump does and says to know that what he was saying would incite violence. How do we know this? Because they've proven that these people have proven that they're insane. They're sick. If I spend a lot of time in the deep, dark corners of the internet, seeking out where these extremists live, where they talk, where they do things, to better understand the process. And they're sick. And that is what Trump wanted. He wanted to take people that were disturbed and trigger them to the point that that's what they would do. We saw it coming, and it came. As soon as he decided he didn't want to even concede, that he wanted us to fight these ridiculous court battles, you knew that the last resort, and he's always the most dangerous when he's got no other options and his back is against the wall, that he would resort to, kind of sneaking in his secret language to get violence going. That being said, I have less confidence about there not being violence on Wednesday. I think there will be. I think it will be much more controlled for the reasons you stated. The FBI has, like you said, has been really, really hustling and ensuring that the transition of power will be not only safe, but, and this is very important, will be public. There are a lot of people that have said, oh, they should do it in a room, and I have been 100% dead set against that. It needs to be exactly where it always is. And I have confidence now, that the military, the National Guard, and the Secret Service, and the FBI, and any other law enforcement agency that's involved will do a better job of ensuring that transition of power happens, and it happens publicly. That being said, I go outside the perimeter, and there's going to be violence. If you don't get it in the perimeter, they'll look for it somewhere else, and that's what I'm more thinking is going to happen.
Yeah, and they've actually already arrested people. One woman was trying to board a flight today with saying that she was part of law enforcement. Another person had credentials. Yeah. It's a whole thing. But I think that what's important here is to really underscore the fact that the people that committed violence on the Capitol, they are such a and this is mind-blowing if you stop and think about it. When you think about how many people were at the Capitol, they were such a small group of people. So when we think about the extremists online and the people that are sharing all the rhetoric and getting amped up by what Donald Trump has said, that's a small section of the general population. But now you take the people that come from those little extremist echo chambers or feedback loops, and then they spin offline and they go into the real world to commit real world violence. That's an even smaller percentage. So if we say, for purposes of conversation, we say that 1% is online and extremists and they've radicalized themselves, then that 1%, another 1%, so an even smaller percentage actually commit real world violence. And I think that's
a big step. Yeah, it's a big step to go from saying the election was rigged to then storming the ticket to D.C. or driving to D.C. with a trunk full of semi-automatic weapons. It
doesn't. Yeah, it's not. There's not a logical kind of a leap for people to go from being online, sharing all of this disinformation, buying into conspiracy theories, to waking up tomorrow and saying, "I'm going to go storm to the Capitol." What happens is those people that end up in this, what is one of the final tiers of self-radicalization, that commit real-world acts of violence. And you can look at this back at the Pulse shooter. You can look back at the Charleston shooting. Unfortunately, Columbine. Even look, Sandy Hook, etc.
You look at Al Qaeda and ISIS also.
Exactly. When we look
the
at
model
the people,
is the same.
Zach Chesser, Anwar al-Awlaki, the people that led others to incite violence, the people that actually incited violence is such a small percentage of the online radicals. And it's not to be dismissive. I'm not dismissing what they're doing. But I think that it's important that we understand that this is not some massive issue of all of these people that are just going to, we're not going to show up one day and find 10,000 people that are radicalized online and commit real world acts of violence. It's a slow drip over time, and it has to be stopped. And we have to regulate things, and we have to ensure that people are not getting caught in feedback loops. They're not finding themselves in echo chambers. They're getting the mental health help that they need before they do these things. And I think that's really important to have those conversations.
So to answer Dave's question, though, specifically, Dave, the answer to your question is the Secret Service does. So the Secret Service has overall control over Inauguration Day security, and then they run point. They basically delegate, Capitol Police, you've got this, National Guard, you've got
they have their liaisons,
security, whatever. But overall, it's the Secret Service. It's no different than if the president, travels and comes somewhere, comes to your town and he's doing an event. The Secret Service may use local law enforcement, and they may use FBI for investigation and whatever, but the Secret Service is always in charge. When it involves the president, the Secret Service is top dog above everybody else. So, answering Dave's question, I don't disagree with either one of you. I do think there's going to be violence. I don't think there's going to be violence anywhere near the Capitol building. But I do think you can't stop people from being stupid. Right? Stupid people are going to be stupid. And, nobody ever succeeded in life by overestimating the capabilities of the American people. So, if stupid things can be done, we're very capable of doing stupid things as a country. And I think they're not sending their best people. And, the reason why
I love your use of that quote.
Dude,
words.
It's the way if you
they
look
are
at
not sending us their best.
Think about how all these people are getting caught.
Yep.
90% of them are getting caught because they're like, yo, I'm in Nancy Pelosi's office right now.
Yeah,
Check it out. I know I probably just blew out the microphone, but that's true. These idiots got caught. Most of them.
Yeah, because law enforcement knew exactly who they were because they said who they were. While they were after committing the crime.
What about the guy who was wearing his work credentials? Legitimately wearing his work credentials while storming the Capitol. They caught it on photo, and he was wearing them around his neck, out. Not even tucked under his shirt, just out.
Well, it was him, and then there was the firefighter that was wearing the CFD hat.
And it begs the question, is it stupidity? Or did they think, truly believe that they would overthrow the government and it wouldn't matter?
They didn't think. No, they didn't think. I had this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about it, and I'm like, look, I believe that there were people there that were there legitimately to protest, to stand outside the Capitol and be like, the election was stolen. I also believe that there was a small section of people that were there literally to take the Capitol and tear down democracy.
Which we've seen the evidence of, the planning.
Exactly. And so those people got mixed in with the protesters, and the protesters joined the mob mentality and this is so exciting. And then they all stormed, and what you see is that some of the people that got in the Capitol were like, oh, now what do we do now? And they're like the dog that caught the car. And those people that are super confused about what just happened to them.
I remember you saying that, that's
right. But then you have this, we're starting to see a lot more women buy into QAnon and conspiracy theories, which as a woman, I'm kind of like, honey, how did you get there? And this one was a school counselor, and she said she was leaving her job to go and actually invest more time in this. I don't understand, but she was at the Capitol as well, and they caught her. She was actually there at the speaker's seat in the House next to the guy it was a whole thing. And I just shake my head, because I mean this in the nicest way, guys. I understand how guys get sucked into conspiracy theories. I get it. When it comes to women, I'm a little
too, honestly. Yeah.
We just do it because pretty women are there. That's really we don't care about theory.
I'll be the I'll be the first one to say men are the easy targets for these things. They are. I should say they.
You don't think he's with the FBI? No, but he has everything I need to do this. Right?
My favorite was the chick from Texas who flew on her private jet to take over the Capitol. And then while she was there, she did a live infomercial on her phone. I mean,
that's because she's also a life coach Think about that.
She should get pardoned just for that. Like, I just think, I mean, if you're gonna pull that, you automatically get a pardon. Like, just go.
Just for having the brass ones to do that.
I mean, come on. Respect that. Like, then what are we doing?
And don't get me wrong, like, and Marietta can attest to this. I've been for so long been I say it all. I used to say it all the time. Like, I really try to avoid demonizing Trump supporters, like, as a group. There are a lot of, and a lot of that that mindset comes from me. Like I said, I grew up in Brooklyn, lived in Los Angeles, then lived in DC, and now I live just outside of Youngstown, Ohio. And the move to Youngstown, Ohio, really, truly changed my perspective, because the truth is there are a lot of people with a lot of legitimate problems, regular people, normal people who don't storm the Capitol, that have real problems that get ignored. And this was a result of that. I happen to live in one of the areas that was, that gets written about a lot as one of those Obama-Trump swing areas.
Sure.
It's the people here in Youngstown is a unique situation. They have been screwed over here, generation after generation after generation after generation, by politicians. When somebody comes and listens, talks their language, and says, I'm going to fight for you, first one in 30, 40 years that came here and said, I'm going to fight for you.
Right. And
there are places like Youngstown, Ohio, all over the country. So I really tried hard not to demonize Trump supporters as en masse. But as more and more of them become radicalized, detached from reality, and just not willing to budge when you're having a reasonable discussion, I find it tougher to not demonize them. And I hate doing it, but at the same time, I didn't storm the Capitol. I didn't like that Donald Trump won. I spent a year of my life on that, and I didn't storm the Capitol.
So I think the dividing line for me is I have zero issues with people who voted for Donald Trump. Believe it or not, I actually don't. And I know I've been accused otherwise. And for anybody who's watching, if I haven't made this clear, I got zero issues with people who actually voted for Trump. Everybody has the reasons. I don't think I've lost too many elections in my life to ever demonize people who vote for somebody I don't think they should have voted for.
I can relate to that.
Here's where I will draw the line. And I have started drawing the line. And I've been very, very clear and intentional about this. If you believe that this election was fraudulent, illegal, incorrect, out of the ordinary, fishy in any way whatsoever, you and I are done.
Right.
And I literally mean you and I are done. I have cut ties with family members. I have cut ties with people I used to attend church with. I have cut ties with former colleagues.
There comes a point where...
Pretty sure I've cut ties with somebody I got elected to Congress. Or did I? Did I? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. He doesn't seem to talk much, even when he has the floor.
Yeah, we were going to do a Brian Mass speech parody tonight, but
we're going to just sit here for an hour in silence?
No,
wait for other people to log on without the link.
Look, I think what we're failing to see when it comes to Brian Mast, I said this on air this morning on To The Point, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. The fact is while I commend his service to the military in protecting my freedoms overseas, I am appalled and shocked that when his country needed him the most, he turned his back on everybody and decided to grandstand on the floor of Congress and do something that he knows deep down is completely wrong. And I think that's unfortunate. And so to your point, Jacob, yes, if anybody thought this past election was rigged, show me the evidence, but I'm willing to bet that you can't, because 50 plus court cases have been tossed out because there's zero evidence by judges that were appointed by the president.
Right. So as the unofficial...
By the way, we can lump Ryan Crenshaw into that group also.
We can.
I have to throw his name out there because he sickens me.
Yeah.
I got into a little bit of trouble on Twitter the other night. Fortunately, for the first time ever, So I I saw Brian go after Jake Tapper, who I have eminent respect for.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, don't go after Tapper. I'll go after you.
And so I jumped in because that's what I do, and that got picked up. And I actually got a text message from my former communications director, who then said that I was the worst person she ever worked for, and how much she hated me, and she didn't actually work for me, and so I thought that was funny. But anyway,
funny and a compliment at the end of the day.
Yeah, no. So here's
certain people say they hate me or they want to kill me. Sometimes I take that as the biggest compliment ever.
Brian is a curious case because, and I don't like talking about this or about him, as Mariana knows better than anybody. But it came up, and I want to address it. Brian, when he was injured, however he was injured, okay, that's irrelevant. And I'm not casting aspersions on his injury. I'm just saying he was injured in the line of duty. He could have taken his payout and his pension. He's fully retired, by the way, which means he's paid his full Army salary. Gets full Army benefits, just like as if he were in.
Oh, he's fully retired. Wow.
He could have taken all of that and lived a really nice, comfortable life out in the country, and nobody would have faulted him for it. He would have earned it. I would have respected it. He chose to get up and challenge himself and do something with his life, and he deserves our respect and admiration for that. And I mean that. He's not watching this, so it doesn't matter. I don't even think.
And I remember feeling exactly that when he first came on the scene and started running. I'm like, wow, he's already given so much for his country, and he's ready to do more. And like, I had such high hopes for him.
When we first started that campaign, and Mariana knows this, so she can back me up on this. We really focused on avoiding Trump entirely. Trump wasn't a win for us. It was a swing district. Brian wasn't a big fan. I don't know if I just outed him or not, but wasn't a huge fan. And I, of course, was not. And we were focused on our race and getting Brian elected and not Donald Trump elected. And the idea being building him a long-term platform, giving him prominence. I mean, you look at where, Liz Cheney is and where she's rising. And I didn't say because of this past week, just overall, she has
taken her time, but she's been on a steady upward.
But she has the credibility of being, open-minded and bipartisan and pragmatic. And Brian, who had no political affiliation whatsoever before he ran for office, by the way, I will say that publicly. Had no connection to the Republican Party, didn't really care about any of the Republican Party platform issues. And again, Marianne and I talked about this during the race, so she can back me up on this. Didn't care either way, and originally was thinking about running for office as a Democrat. So he wasn't although Trump is a Democrat, so ironically.
Right.
And suddenly now is gone from being a guy who we all should admire and respect and support and want more of, to go up and spread this asinine, seditious, divisive lie, because it's a lie. He knows better. I mean, in his defense, he's never actually seen a campaign before. Like, you've never seen a candidate less detached from their own campaign than Brian. No idea what goes on, daily activities, daily operations, how it works.
First time I've ever heard that from anybody in consulting anyway.
No idea whatsoever. So, in fairness, he wouldn't know a good campaign from a bad campaign. But he knows flat out that this is a lie. And not only was he up there prior to the riot, clapping like a seal right behind Ted Cruz, after this all went down, and after an attempted coup attempt, which is what it was.
Yeah, like, let's just call a spade here. That's what it was.
He rolled his wheelchair back up to the Capitol and voted to continue a lie. And I find that to be disgusting. And I think that an action like that takes away years of goodwill that you've built up. One decision, one action against your own nation. I have
after fighting for
well, and he's using cover. The cover he's using on this deal is that he needs to hear from the people that stormed the Capitol that they did it because of what Trump said. He wants evidence.
Irrelevant why they did it.
But he doesn't need proof to peddle the disinformation that the election was stolen and that there was fraud. So it's like you can't have one without the other. And I am just absolutely to me, it's just ridiculous.
And the worst part for me, and I'm just going to be really honest, it's my show, what the hell? He hid behind his injury. And that bothered me, I think, more than anything, because his first comment, trolling Jake, was something to the effect of, I didn't lose my legs on the battlefield, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is the card he constantly plays over and over and over, over and over and over. And we get it, and it just is what it is. And, by the way, almost 8,000 people watched last week. I don't know. I just thought I would point that out. So if you're not really good at math, since we're streaming on like 9 different channels at the moment. Anyway, so that was my biggest issue at the moment, was just basically tearing down your oath and what you did and what you said and what you say you stood for. And again, that you have your own men and women who are out there, who are fighting the battle and who are, you know what I mean? Like, it just bothered me. It bothered me a great deal. And I can't wait for him to now be irrelevant because he doesn't have Donald Trump covering for him anymore.
Well, he'll have an interest. I mean, look, let's be honest. This past election cycle, he fought for his life in Congress. Yeah,
for sure.
It's a tough race. Yeah.
Well, it was only a tough race because he made some indignant comments. So it wouldn't have been.
A common theme.
But, here we are. So I can guarantee you that people will come out of the woodwork in 2 years to run against him, and he will have a very tough race again. And there's a possibility that it will flip again, just like it did when Alan West lost his reelection. Yep. And it'll be really interesting to see what happens within his district and if the Republicans are able to hold steady into that. But right now, I wouldn't double down on that as a win for him.
No, nor would I. And he's not the only one. There are so many out there that I've followed or known from very early days that really disappointed me. Like, at least Stefanik disappointed me. I had such high hopes for her. She could have changed the conversation in the GOP. She had that ability. She had that future. She was already laying the groundwork for that future, and it's all gone. Nicole Maliotakis, who just won election, and I've known her since her career in New York started. I know people who work for her, work with her. Like, she's another one. So much promise. Could have been a breath of fresh air. A Republican from New York, like, breathing life into a party dominated by old white men. Threw it all away. And for
and maybe this is the question. Maybe this is the question. Are they throwing it away because they have to abandon their principles to be able to have a seat at the table with all the old white men? Or did they not have principles to begin with? Or even more so, they kind of are just like, I mean, these are things that you have to ask, because the one thing that the Republican Party is not good at being welcoming to women.
They're not good at being welcoming to a lot of people.
I mean, this is true.
Let's be real. But women, especially, if you look at if you just look, a little bit at the targets of some of the most heinous stuff and the most vile things and the most actionable things like trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan, things like here in Ohio, Amy Acton, who ran the health department here in Ohio and was a real leader in Ohio, not not becoming a total disaster at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, having people with weapons on her front lawn to the point that she had to resign. You look at the targets of these sorts of things. Just look at them, just observe them, and look at who is being targeted, and you know exactly like why.
So the irony of a cop friend of mine just messaged me, and he says to me, the reason why nobody spoke up on the House floor when Brian said what he said was because they didn't want to violate their Fifth Amendment right.
That's good. That's a good one.
I mean, you know.
Also, yes.
Yeah. He said that's why you got silenced, because they had been They're
very familiar with the Constitution, as you can tell.
Yes, they're all very passionate about the Constitution, for sure.
Patriots.
Okay, so you guys brought up something interesting, and this is a conversation that I've had with quite a few people recently, and that is, I think that those people, like, I think, for example, a guy like the gentleman we just were discussing doesn't really represent a MAGA district. Mariana lives just outside of it, I believe, and if I remember my boundary lines.
Yes.
And of course, I lived there 10 plus years, and my family's there, and I may still have a friend or two there. I'm not sure after the last couple of weeks. It's not a MAGA district. It is a Republican-leaning district. It actually, ironically, includes Jupiter Island, amongst who residents include the Bush family. And so
we all know that, like, not all R plus whatever districts are the same.
Yeah, so I think the question now becomes, not every district is Matt Gaetz's district, which is like the most MAGA district in America, and it's just down the road for me, of course. So these people who are, these people who you mentioned, who voted, basically to support sedition, who aren't necessarily in hardcore MAGA districts, are they now weak? Have they opened themselves up to a challenge? Should they be worried? Am I just being dumb? What is it?
They should be worried, but we have to remember the electorate. Look, we have to remember the electorate, the American electorate, has the attention span of a goldfish, right? And that's sad to say, but that's just how it is. And so what's going to take, it's going to take people like us reminding those people in the district that 2 years ago, Brian Mast went onto the floor and did something really dumb. And I think that's not, look, I'm willing to bet that the Democrats are already canvassing that district and looking for the next person to run against him. And they're figuring out what videos they're going to
I am just going to cautiously suggest that they are and leave it there.
And I will add to that, they're doing it all over the country. I've spoken with multiple candidates who are recruited.
Yeah.
I just will say that I've had some conversations with some people about a district, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not surprising. Look, he should be worried. Like, just because you are elected to office does not mean you get a free pass to get a re-election, right? You have to continue to work for your constituents, not for whoever's occupying the Oval Office that happens to be within your party. And you may or may not think that they have, the keys to the kingdom in terms of a war chest, and they're going to write money to you. Because the truth of the matter is, unless he can do something that's going to directly benefit Trump, not going to happen.
Yeah, and plus he could be in jail, so I don't think at that point he's even going to worry about it anyway.
Yeah, and not to mention what war chest nobody's going to give to them anymore.
Yeah, well,
small dollar donations can only get you so far, but when the biggest companies in essentially every industry in America are saying, like,
let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Like, what is the war chest? There is none.
Mm-hmm. So my phone this past week or so has been blowing up with people talking about, asking about, referring to all of these corporate PAC money donations, suddenly drying up. Now, let's be real. a U.S. Senate seat in Florida is a $60 million race,
Right.
give or take. It's roughly the same for governor. Disney not giving $500,000 a year to NRSC doesn't move the needle.
Yeah, what's it really going to do? Yeah,
it doesn't move the needle. However, I think what it does is it forces people to start thinking about it. And I think we have spent this past week, I've never in my entire political career, which is significant longer than either of you, which isn't a compliment.
Although you wouldn't look it. You would not look it.
I have never once in my life seen multiple large corporate donors walking away from giving donations. This is a first. So do I think that it suddenly changes the landscape? Not really. But I think if I am, incoming NRSC chair Rick Scott, hilarious that you would make a self-funder the head of NRSC.
Yeah, that was
an odd pick, but
considering that the only job is to do something you've never done before.
Literally the only job is to raise money, and dude just writes checks. Anyway, I do think
planning on funding the whole NRSC, but
I'm not sure he's got a whole lot more money left, to be honest with you. So yeah. I think that has got to be a telling statement to him to go back to his colleagues and say, we're kind of in trouble here, fellas. And I don't know that I have high hopes for removal of Trump next week.
I don't either.
Yeah, following week maybe, I guess. Like, I'm not holding my breath. But I do think it's extremely telling that there's this huge pushback from people. This huge pushback from newspapers that have endorsed, politicians and large groups, and like this isn't going away. Like this isn't something that people are just going to go, oh yeah, you tried to have an insurrection against America, but we're cool now.
Yeah, like this is not a big protest that maybe got a little bit out of hand. This is different. This is different. It's different than anything any of us has ever seen. There's a lot, and like you said, like $500,000 in a $60 million race, it's nothing. A lot of people love Disney though, and when they see that Disney is like, nope, enough. Just like Hallmark, when Hallmark says we're not giving money anymore, I don't think that's bad. A lot of people love
on Hallmark movies.
Hey, I didn't
They're guilty pleasures for me. They put me in a different world where people don't try to overthrow the government.
I love a good Hallmark movie.
They are feel-good movies. They're geniuses at Hallmark, I think.
Seriously. Yeah, I don't care that it's
they tapped into every feel-good emotion. Yeah, this happens at every feel-good emotion and just like mainline it to people. It's genius.
I love it.
But like, yeah, a lot of these companies are very, very public facing. Not all of them are, Northrop Grumman, which most people don't really care or know what they do beyond the obvious. But like when a company like Disney or Hallmark or when they say like, we're not doing this anymore, that's a signal. It's a huge signal.
Well, and it's a reverse boycott, right? So when people get fed up at a company's ethics and what they're doing, they'll boycott the company. Now people are watching companies boycott candidates, and hopefully that encourages us to elect more candidates that are doing the right thing and that they're understanding that their words matter.
And ultimately, it could be good for a lot of business. I just bought two pairs of Nike sneakers because they decided to stop giving money. And I'm like, you know what? I support companies that do the right thing. They did the right thing. I'm going to support them. I can't imagine I'm the only person that does that.
Yeah.
No, that's an excellent point. I don't think that's something that we really think a whole lot about.
No, but I think that there's an opportunity going forward. And if you're looking for a good book, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the guy that founded Nike, excellent.
Yes. I would not tell that to my wife because if there's two things that I have way too much of, it's hats and shoes and sneakers.
Okay, that's a great segue. And I didn't even text you to say that. So here's one thing that we're going to start doing. that is really important to me, and this is kind of funny. So one of the reasons, Mariana, why you and I are such good friends is that you and I each have a passion for books.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of our lives. It's something you and I like to talk about. And we don't talk about books on this show enough. And so we are going to talk about books tonight, or a book. And so what I want to do, and I didn't tell either one of you this, so you both look at me like, oh my God, I only have the comic book in here.
It's been a long time since I've had time to sit. Man, I miss those days where I could sit down and just read.
No, so I want to do, and I'm going to start. So I'll give you guys, a little bit of time to sort of think about it for a second. Marianne's just going to turn around and grab something.
Yeah, I know you got enough there.
But I want to start, and we can do more than one. A couple books. One that I just finished reading actually was Wright Thompson's Pappyland, which is really, really good. If neither one of you is familiar with Wright Thompson, he's actually a writer for ESPN the magazine. I think he's probably the best features writer in America. He has a book that's a compilation of previous columns that I literally can't remember, but you can probably find at the library. He's written some just amazing profiles. He spent like a month with Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan was turning 50 and wrote this incredible profile of Michael Jordan at 50. Pappyland, he basically, and this isn't why I got it, by the way, but the Pappy Van Winkle bourbon, which is this mythical, $2,500 bottle.
Holy grail of bourbons, yeah.
Yeah. So what he did was
he probably have a whole show just on bourbon and scotch and all that.
We've tossed that idea around.
Because I, like you, am a bourbon. I don't know if you drink scotch, but I'm also a big scotch.
Not much because I'm American.
Well, I took a DNA test and found out that I'm part Scottish, like 3% Scottish. So now I'm drinking the elixir of my homeland.
I am actually Swiss German by way of Ireland. So I do like Irish whiskey, but I like bourbon because my people are Scotch Irish.
Based on my DNA results, it would take us the rest of the show for me to go down the list of all the things I am.
I'm not surprised.
The world.
So Pappyland was the first one. Pappy, but it really wasn't a story about bourbon and make it as bourbon. Actually, it was a story about fathers and legacy, and a man who chased his father's legacy. And for people who aren't familiar with bourbon, it literally takes decades to do basically one run of bourbon. That's literally. I know it's aged in a barrel for 4 years and all that kind of stuff.
But it sounds like something Mitch Albom would write in a book about baseball.
So Pappyland is the first one. I strongly recommend it to the more than 3 people who are watching. Generally won't be named. And then the other one was, and I've talked about it before, but I'm talking about it again, is Mark Manson's book. I don't get a cut of this, but I don't know that I've read a book in the last 10 years that changed my life as much as this one.
Based just off the title, it sounds like something I need to read.
It really is. And I have described it to people that it's basically sort of a modern take on Stoic philosophy, but a stripped down take. And it's why my former employee can text me rude messages and I just texted her back, "Thank you for texting me," instead of arguing with me because of some things that I learned this year from that book. I'm a subscriber to Mark Manson's newsletters. I'm a huge fan of his. I share his stuff on social media all the time. Just the idea of disconnecting from 99.9% of the world and really focusing on what actually matters to you, what you should give a fuck about. Sorry, Mom. That's really the takeaway from the book. And even doing things like, pursuing self-help. And when you're pursuing self-help, you are focusing on all the negative things that are wrong with you. I don't like this about myself. I don't like that about myself. I don't like this about myself. And what ends up happening is your obsession with those negative things becomes your thoughts, and it becomes a self-fulfilling sort of thing. So that's one of the chapters that's in the book. So Mariana, since you read more than Richie does, You get to go next.
What gives you that idea?
You're smarter than I am, Mariana. That's what he's trying to say.
Yeah, I love to read. I don't know. It's just probably like one of my favorite things to do. So as you can see, there's like a plethora of books behind me. And I would love to be like, oh, it's this one, and like pull some, prophetic book. But I couldn't, because a lot of the books that are my super favorite books, this is really weird, they were in the other room. So my husband, who's so gracious to bring them to me, so gracious.
So from the spouse.
Yeah, I was like, hey, I need these books. So the first one, which I think is actually really timely, which is bizarre because it happens in the 1800s, is Brad Meltzer's The Lincoln Conspiracy, which if you're following me on Twitter, I've been talking about this like nonstop recently.
I also ordered it after you recommended it to me several weeks ago.
That makes me really happy. So this book is fantastic, and it eerily parallels a lot of what we're seeing today. And it talks about the entire, the whole process of getting Lincoln from Illinois to DC to be able to be inaugurated as our 16th president, and everything that they had to go through. And it's really cool too, because there's detectives in here that are working to help Lincoln to figure out about if there's a plot to kill him. And it's the first female detective that they ever know about in history. And she's part of the whole like plot to figure out what's happening and uncover it. So it's a really good read. Brad Meltzer and Josh Mensch, they're just fantastic. They also wrote The First Conspiracy, which I also read. I'm totally not getting a cut, but I'm forever like talking about their books because they're fantastic. They're both really well. The First Conspiracy was actually, my favorite part of this book was, it was written because another author, Josh Ellis, I think that was it, he wrote The Founding Brothers, and he was doing research about our founding fathers, and in a footnote he found that there was a supposed conspiracy to assassinate George Washington. And Brad Meltzer came across this and reached out to the author and asked if there was any truth, and he said he didn't know. So what happened is Joseph Ellis, that's correct, thank you. Joseph Ellis wound up writing back to Brad Meltzer and saying, I'm not sure, but I found this in a footnote. And so Brad and Josh sat down and researched and wrote an entire book around the plot and conspiracy to attempt to assassinate George Washington during the American Revolution War. So that's, if you're a history war buff, you like that. And the best political book that I have read to give any shining light without any type of like veneer or, any type of shining and trying to wax and wane poetically about politics and what it's like to be in office and what we do in politics, is Democracy by Trey Radel.
Yes.
This came out a few years ago, and it's a fabulous read. It's raw, it's funny. Yeah. It really just underscores what it's like to be in Congress. And I like that he doesn't mince words. He's to the point. So those are kind of like my political reads. I also read personal development and chick lit. And for personal development, I'll just say, for those of you looking for New Year things, The Year of Yes. Shonda Rhimes, she wrote Grey's Anatomy, How to Get Away with Murder. And it's just a really good book about saying yes and what happens when she spends a year of her life saying yes to every opportunity that comes her way.
I thought you were going to share like the Girl Wash Your Face book or whatever that one was.
No. Nope. I did read that one, and I read the other one, but then I was not very pleased with how she handled some things and how things were handled publicly. And so now I can no longer support her as an author.
Fair enough.
Yep.
I will point out for the viewers that Brad Meltzer is a fantastic human being. If you've ever interacted with him on social media.
Yes.
Also, if you sign up for his email list, I don't know if I should tell people this or not, but it's his actual email. So it's not a PR firm. Like if you send an email to that address, it's not a PR firm. Brad writes you back.
Wow.
And because I have 3 or 4 different times asked him questions about things in his books, and he has answered me every single time. He even signs it like BM or something on the bottom, but it's like Brad M1234@gmail or some nonsense. Like,
yeah, he's fantastic. I mean, he's just a fantastic human being, and the writing and like everything is just so well done. Like I just couldn't put it down. So if you're looking for really good reads right now, also you can follow me on Goodreads. I clock everything I'm reading. So
Yeah.
Richie, my man.
Yeah.
Sorry, Richie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody could follow that up.
I mean, Superman number 129 counts. We can do that if you want to do that.
Yeah, so for my whole life, I've read mostly, like 99% of the stuff I've read has been nonfiction, political related stuff. And when 20 hours a day is spent on that, I'm like, I can't, I'm too tired. I can't read but I will say, just in terms of recommendations, I'd say my favorite political book that I've ever read, it's just a personal favorite, The Last Campaign, about Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah.
And that book it was just amazingly written, the amazing stories amazingly told, and whether or not you've worked on a campaign, it's just outstanding piece of work. It's beautifully written about and the subject matter of of the United States in that period, and fascination with the Kennedys, plus the dynamic between John and Bobby. It's just, everything about it is just wonderful. If I were to suggest one political book, I would say that you haven't read that one. Otherwise, I'm trying to make a real concerted effort to pull away from reading political stuff. And so I'm starting off by getting back to some of my old favorites that I haven't read in a long time. And so I don't think I've ever mentioned this to either of you. My favorite writer of all time is Ernest Hemingway. To the point that I have a quote of his tattooed on my arm. My very favorite writer ever. So I'm working my way through his complete collection of short stories, which they get often overlooked by some of his greater works, but the short stories are just incredible. The Snows of Kilimanjaro literally made me cry the first time I read it. And so by that, great read, the complete short stories of Ernest Hemingway. So I'm working my way back through that. Next after that on my list is a book my parents got me because I am a massive baseball fan. A huge Mets fan. So they had bought me it was either last year or the year before, it was that long ago, a book called The Bad Guys Won, about the 1986 Mets.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah. Any baseball fan, I think, will appreciate it, even if you're not a Mets fan. But the 86 team in my family is they're heroes. My mother will to this day tell the story of me. Actually, I was 2 years old at the time, sitting and watching the ball go through Bill Buckner's legs. Wearing my little Mets jersey. And, so that team, the players on the team, I love Keith Hernandez. I mean, it was just, it was such a unique team, and typical of me and typical of New York. The reason the book is called The Bad Guys Won is because they literally were they fought more often than any other team. They just went on the field, and other cities were they dreaded the days when the Mets would have to come into town for a series because they would destroy hotel rooms and get into fights with the other team, all while snorting coke and
with each other
house and with each other. So I'm a huge Mets fan. So The Bad Guys Won is on the list. Then after that, I'm going to go back to an old favorite of mine, second favorite writer, Hunter S. Thompson. Probably not one of his most popular works, but The Rum Diaries is amazing. It's a really great story, and for me personally, really interesting because it takes place in Puerto Rico in the 60s, which was when my grandparents were, were living with my grandparents on my father's side are Puerto Rican. Well, my grandfather he passed away from COVID-19 earlier in the year, but they lived through that, and so I like reading that narrative and knowing more about what Puerto Rico was like when they were in their teens. And Hunter S. Thompson is my kind of writer. I just anyone who knows me and knows the way I talk and what I talk about and how I look at things would not be surprised that Hemingway and Thompson are two of my favorites. And then my wife has purchased me several books, non-political books, for my mental health. Because she insists. She's like, Richie, stop reading Reddit before bed. Don't do it. Get off of Reddit. Get off of Twitter. She bought me a book about The Office, which is my favorite television show ever. And another book. His first name is escaping me. Offerman from Parks and Rec, Ron Swanson. A book by him because he does like woodworking and stuff, which is something I wanted to get into. So that's my list. I try to go back and forth. I got to stop getting into the heavy stuff like Robert Caro's The Power Broker, which I would very much recommend if you have about 14 months of time to read it.
Yes.
But it's an amazing book.
I am actually in the process right now. This is no joke. So my wife and I have gotten into The Crown. My
wife.
So it's interesting because it's not my kind of thing. And I probably make fun of people who watched it because I make fun of people for everything. And yet it's actually really good. I don't have to tell you the way to do this, but the writing and the depth and the storytelling and I would love to have their budget. Their shooting budget has got to be incredible.
The attention to detail.
And so what happened was first season in particular, my wife and I talked about Winston Churchill quite a bit. And that has personal significance for me because Monticello is named after my late best friend, Joe. And his website, his blog, which was a very original blog, it was literally on blogger.com, I'm not joking, was called Monticello. And his hero was Winston Churchill. And usually every year for his birthday, I would buy him a Winston Churchill book, either one of Churchill's actual books that he wrote or a biography of him, about him. And I know one year I bought him Manchester wrote this trilogy, the Churchill trilogy, and they're all 1,000 pages each. Yeah. And so after watching the first season of The Crown, where John Lithgow plays totally unrecognizable, you have no idea.
Oh my God! Yeah,
it was incredible.
So good. It was unbelievable.
So I actually got the first volume of the trilogy from the library. And it is 900 and some odd pages, and I probably will finish it by the time Biden is out of office, which could be a month from now, or it could be 4 years from now.
It depends on when Q decides he wants to arrest them.
Yeah. But it's actually really good. The reason why it's 3 volumes of 1,000 pages each, because he sets the stage very well and tells you all about Victorian England and the Empire and what the Empire meant. By the way, fun fact, as we lose our... No, we're not. I'm just joking. Is that what I didn't know, and I was a pretty massive menswear dork. What I didn't know is that before they had formal dry cleaning, that when rich people, when their clothes got dirty, however they defined dirty back then, when you didn't bathe and all that stuff, they literally would take their clothes back to their tailor, and the tailor would disassemble the entire garment and hand wash it and press it and then re-sew it again. That's how they cleaned clothes back in the day. So I'm sorry that it took everybody an hour and 20 minutes to get to the really good stuff on this show. But that was utterly fascinating to me that, you
Yeah.
know, or you said, or if you really were rich, you just bought a new suit.
Well, yeah.
So
That
anyway,
is a fact I did not know. And I'm
No,
full
I-
of useless facts.
telling you, dude, this is why you come on the show. Richie, you're on Twitter, of course.
I am.
So for those who are currently not following you, they should be following you because you're way smarter and funnier than I am. So if you're following me, you really should
I
be following me.
appreciate that.
Your company, Great Lake Strategy. Give Richie a call. I've done it. You should do it too. All the smart people call Richie for help.
That's true.
Mariana, thanks for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me, Jacob. This has been fantastic. I really,
Hopefully
it's just,
Jessica's at home watching us.
yeah, right. I hope so. Yeah, no, this is fantastic. I think that this is wonderful. And we got to talk about books, which, as both of you know, how much I love talking about books
You
because I'm
love
always
books,
reading.
yeah.
Yeah. At work, I've
I
been
miss
trying to
reading
get
so
people
much.
to do a book club, and it's just like, it's like a running
It's
joke
like
now.
embarrassing for me sometimes when I'm like, yeah, I'm not currently reading anything because I'm just so tired after doing all this work, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm also like a college professor on top of it, and I'm not currently reading anything.
Well, appreciate
I
both.
don't have enough jobs. I have to take.
You're easily bored.
Yeah, I have to be doing something every time of the day.
Well, appreciate both of you guys coming on. Appreciate all the folks at home for joining us. We'll see y'all next week. Same
Pleasure.
bat time, same bat channel.
Thank you so much.